players on the board. We'll bring you into the match as soon as possible here. Sylvan Advocate on turn 2 for Atchison. Warden of the First Tree for Rupp.
At this stage in the game, the Warden matters a lot more than the Advocate, but the Advocate tends to matter a lot more easily in the late game. Warden takes a lot of mana sink to actually upgrade into a significant creature, whereas the Advocate just happens naturally off playing lands.
You see 2 colors set there for Rupp for Warden of the First Tree. He'll go ahead and swing it in, represents the pump. No blocks, and he'll be pumping anyway. Atchinson down to 16.
Yep. May as well attack before activating. You'll get somebody every 1,000 games or something.
All right, back to Atchison. So both these players are playing the same 4 colors. You know, they are still Siege Rhino Reflector Mage decks. On Atchison's side, he's also a Jace deck, whereas Rupp's side is playing Anafenza the Foremost.
Unclear which of those 2 cards you'd rather have in a deck like this.
Yeah, it's actually pretty close.
Yeah, Anafenza applies a lot of pressure, and Jace wins a lot of games. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think Anafenza fits the strategy better, but there's something to be said that Jace is just enough more powerful of a card that maybe you're supposed to play it instead.
Yeah.
Not to say that Anafenza isn't powerful. That's more of a testament to Jace just being Jace.
Right. That is the thing that Jace does best.
All right, Reflector Mage will be the turn 3 play for Atchison. It bounces the Warden back to Rupp's hand. Advocate swings in for 2. Jacob down to 16. And speaking of Anafenza, that's going to be the play for Rupp. The 4/4 play will attempt to set up as a blocker.
Anafenza does not square off very well against 2/2/3s.
No, they can gang up to block it. At the same time, Taylor, I believe, has another copy of Reflector Mage.
Faces up even worse against 3/2/3s and in your hand.
Jacob down to 12 on the attack, but no land from Atchison. Go back here. Jacob has a land. Maybe he can play something that Taylor doesn't want to bounce. Perhaps a Siege Rhino.
Yeah. Looks like there's 2 copies of Anafenza. Those are offline for this turn.
Both these players at 7-0 in day 2. They are fighting to get that coveted 9-0 spot going into day 2.
Yeah. The more breathing room you have in day 2, the better. It's definitely high pressure to play in day 2 of a big tournament like this. 690 players.
You know, and one thing we noted last round, both the decks we saw win and go to 6-0 were Siege Rhino decks. And the thing that these decks have in common at 7-0, they are both also Siege Rhino decks.
This follows our Siege Rhino is a good card narrative.
Yeah, I mean, we see tons of non-Rhino decks. We see these Red-Black Dragons. We see Rally. You can't forget that the Rhino decks, they're in the room and they're doing well. And the bounce wars begin here. Reflector Mage from Jacob Rupp will put Sylvan Advocate back in Atchison's hand, and it'll be joined by Warden of the First Tree.
At this stage in the game, if Taylor doesn't start peeling lands, I believe that it will be pretty easy for Jacob to pull ahead. There's just access to 4 mana spells in this Rhino Mirror, kind of matters. He'll be able to 2-spell pretty soon, and that Sylvan Advocate is just going to be a 2/3 until Taylor is able to get some more lands into play. Reflector Mage, going to be a 2/3 no matter what happens. After that first swing at tempo, the card does look less impressive.
Draw was not a land for Taylor. It's an Oath of Nissa.
It's kind of like a land.
It could be a land, right?
Yeah.
Now, that said, he'd have to pay mana to get his land. There's a lot of ways this could go wrong.
Certainly.
Especially because if he's using his green mana to cast it, that could strand things.
If you have a good 3 mana play here, I imagine that you're probably just supposed to take it. Casting the Oath of Nissa and missing on lands means that you might just have to make that same 3 mana play next turn anyway.
Well, that said, if the top 3 cards of your deck aren't lands, then you definitely have to cast Oath of Nissa this turn, right?
That's another good point. You're not going to draw the land either way if the Oath would miss.
Yeah, if the Oath misses, then if the Oath were to miss, then you definitely need to cast the Oath this turn because things are never getting better. Here's a pair of attacks. Jacob will take the free block. 2 damage comes in. Rupp down to 9. Atchison going to go for Oath of Nissa. Let's look for that land. 1, 2, 3. Hits it on the 3rd one down.
I am relatively confident that that land is a Lumbering Falls.
I believe so as well. It's going to come into play tapped.
Yeah, so finding it with the Oath of Nissa this turn is actually huge.
It's good that he hits one. That's going to be his whole turn, however.
Yeah.
That I came into play tapped. That was part of the worry for Taylor. If he didn't hit an untapped land, he wouldn't have another spell. It's a huge price to pay for the land drop. Maybe one that he can't afford to pay. I guess we'll see that play out.
Though the land was the third card, and it comes into play tapped. So it might have been a lose-lose situation, really. This seems like the better loss, even if this isn't good enough, though.
Yeah, at least you got the land.
Yeah.
Inclined to agree there. Oath of Nissa in a deck with 0 planeswalkers from Atchinson's side.
Yeah, not taking advantage of that mana fixing seems a little loose.
That's what the card's all about, right?
Yeah. That's why it's better than Ponder.
It's good in your planeswalker decks.
Yes.
Your green walker decks. Warden's going to swing. No blocks from Atchinson. That will be a pump for Warden. It goes up to 3/3.
The pump for Warden denoted by this random die in the middle of the table, of course.
The one that's nowhere. Oh, there we go. There we go. What does that die mean? It means Warden's a 3/3. Oh, okay. False combat play is an offense of the foremost. He's shutting down Taylor's ground game, but Taylor's still ahead, at least as it stands.
So Taylor has 2 creature lands that he cannot activate at this point in time.
He has both the Hissing Quagmire and Lumbering Falls. 6 cards in hand for Taylor.
This is a board position where throwing Quagmire in front of one of these creatures on the next turn wouldn't be terrible, but it's just not possible.
Yeah, you can't activate it. Giving away a land is huge too. We'll see what he can do here, though.
He's got a Sylvan Advocate floating at the top of his hand. Yeah, that's the play there. Pretty bad.
Fast. Yeah, and a pass. I imagine he was hoping for more that turn.
Yeah.
Draws a fetch land for Rupp. And he will Murderous Cut away the Sylvan Advocate.
So before that Murderous Cut, all of his attacks seemed pretty bad. At this point, you get in damage regardless of how the blocks work. You might be throwing the Anafens into the 2/2/3s. He's hanging the Reflector Mage back. I would expect to attack with all the creatures or none of the creatures.
Now, the reason he cuts pre-combat there is because he wants to know if the Murderous Cut is going to get countered, would be my guess.
Yes. Yeah. Traditionally, when you have a removal spell, you want to avoid, if you get double blocked with the Anafenza here, kill one of the creatures. But blue mana being represented here from an opponent that has not been doing much. So I think that Cast of the Cut was pretty smart. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with this specific attack.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good read that Taylor might have a counter spell. Taylor was stuck on 3 lands, hit a 4th land, and then opted to play a 2-drop.
Yes.
That's really strange.
Absolutely. It looks like there's only 2 cards in the graveyard, so outside of a counter spell, there's not much that Taylor could even be representing.
Looking at a sideboard, we see Dispel, Negate, Disdainful Stroke. Now, all of those, were Taylor to have them in his hand, I would think would have been cast on the Murderous Cut. But it might be that he needs, if he has a Disdainful Stroke, he might need to save it for whatever Jacob's post-combat play is.
Yeah, another creature on this table is much worse than losing a 2/3, I believe.
A Siege Rhino, for example, post-combat would be lights out here.
Yes.
So attacks are in. Counter on Warden. No blocks by Taylor, and Jacob's response is going to be to activate Warden on the first tree to give it lifelink. So Taylor will take 8, go to 4. Jacob will gain 4, go to 12. Big swing here.
Absolutely. So presumably Taylor didn't make that double block because he expects Jacob to have another trick there, but he's really not in a better position than getting hit by a trick. He just
Yeah,
has 2/3s and he's at 4 life.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is we have this board of 2/3s that's just kind of, I mean, he's just getting outsized on the board, right? Warden's now a 4/4, and Offenza's a 4/4. I mean, how's Taylor going to get back into this with 4 mana?
He's outsized by an opponent with more mana, better access to colors. His follow-up is another 2/3.
It's seems to be the theme here.
And on this following turn, that Warden can be activated for its ultimate ability.
That one's that's beatable, right?
It's close to beatable. It's 2 letters off of being beatable.
Okay. I was gonna come up with some way to take 2 other letters off it, but I don't.
Yeah, you just get a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, unbeatable is what we're going for here.
Oh, okay. It's re-beatable. No, that doesn't really work. All right, back to Jacob's turn.
You can come close to the word beetle.
It's beatablist. It's more beatable. No, I'm out.
It's game. It's
game.
It's game.
You got me. Scoop it.
So interestingly, with that hissing Quagmire up last turn, Taylor was technically representing ultimate price. With that Quagmire tapped as his green source instead of the Lumbering Falls, that is no longer a concern of Jacob's, even if it was in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, these Obzon Charms in Jacob's hand, he just has a world of options on this board. I can't imagine that Taylor gets to untap.
No, this game just has to be over on this turn.
Here's the swing. Reflector Mage now a 3/4. I mean, if not this turn, Taylor may have to make the chump block everything play, which is similarly miserable.
I suppose what Taylor is representing with this mana is Valorous Stance.
All right.
So that's also a playable spell.
This is fine. The line Taylor's playing is chump block everything, and we'll put 5 more counters on Warden of the first tree.
Jacob says, "You got nothing. I'm not afraid."
It was hard for Jacob to lose from there. So Jacob Rupp defeats Taylor Atchinson and Obzon Blue from Rupp, moving to 8-0.